Hey everyone! Alright, today's video is going to be about circle graphs. Your objective: I will be able to solve problems using data represented in circle graphs. So a circle graph is just a representation that has sections that represent a part of a whole. And obviously it's going to be in the shape of a circle. So this circle graph in particular, it's representing the percent of hours of a day spent on certain activities. So we can literally see these different sections, and each one represents a part of this whole. So remember, when we have the whole thing, that's 100%. So the whole circle graph represents 100%. And since our topic here is hours of a day, that would be 24 hours. Notice that each section has a label, and each label has a percentage with it. So this person spends 8% of their time eating meals, 8% doing homework, 17% at their job, etc. And you could use that information to figure out, okay, exactly how many hours are they at their job, how many hours are they at school, things like that. So whenever we work with circle graphs, it's going to be very similar to what we have been doing. So first we want to identify like the topic, the subject, that way we can find our label. And we can find the specific section of that circle graph that we want to work with. Then we'll identify the part, whole, and percent. Remember, one is always missing. Then we'll set up a proportion and we will solve. So the percent, that is going to be next to that section's label. So for example, if we had a problem and it's talking about how many hours the person slept, if we're talking about the same circle graph from before, then, oh, there we go. Sorry, my pen decided to stop working for a second. So if the problem is asking about sleep, we'd be concerned about this specific section, and we see that's 25%. Now, whatever label you have, we know sleep is just this part of the circle graph. So whatever the part is, that's just the label of the specific section that you are focusing on. And then the whole, remember that's the same as 100% of something, so the whole is going to be the total amount. So back in this example, since there are 24 hours in one whole day, 24 would be the whole. I want you to keep in mind that everything is proportional on these circle graphs. So for example, if I had a circle and I wanted to represent 50% of that circle, that's the same as half. So it would look about like this. 25%, that's a fourth. It would look about like that. The nice thing about circle graphs is we can literally see each section, so we can literally see that all of these are parts. It's very easy to identify everything. So let's do some examples together. Example 1, if 300 students were surveyed, how many students preferred swimming? Okay, so here is the topic we're concerned about, swimming. So I'm going to find that and box it in. So this is the section that we are trying to figure out. So we have our percent. Now we need the part in the whole. It says 300 students were surveyed, so that means that the whole entire graph is representing 300 students. So we are missing the part. I don't know exactly how many this is worth. So now I'm going to set up the proportion. X over 300 equals 18 over 100. Now I'm going to cross multiply. 100 times x. 18 times 3 is 54, and then I'm just going to add those two zeros. Now I want to divide and isolate the variable. And remember, we can use the zero trick here. Then I would have 54 divided by 1. If you're not comfortable with any of these zero tricks, make sure that you do actually work it out and write all of your steps. So we get 54. So that means that this specific part of the circle graph represents 54 students. And don't forget to label what your answer represents. All right, example 2. If 75 students picked cheese as their favorite pizza topping, how many total were surveyed? So this one is referring to cheese. So that's the section that we want to focus on. And cheese is worth 35% of that graph. So we know that our percent is 35. And now we want to identify the part in the whole. Well, it says 75 students picked cheese. So that means that this section represents 75 students. Now we can literally see that this is only part of the graph, so 75 has to be the part. And it does ask how many total were surveyed, so we know that the whole is missing. So now I'm going to set up the proportion. And we're going to cross multiply. So I would have 35x. 75 times 100 would be 7,500. And I need to isolate the variable, so I want to divide by 35 on each side. And I'm going to come set that up over here. All right, 35 cannot go into 7. But it can go into 75 2 times. And then 35 times 2 would be 70. 35 can go into 50 1 time. $35 could go into 150 4 times, and that would be 140. We'd have 10 left over. Now, I'm going to add a decimal and a 0. Okay. And then 35 could go into 100 2 times. Now, this is asking how many total students were surveyed. So obviously we're not going to have part of a person. So that means that this percentage was rounded whenever they worked this out. So we want to take this value and round it. Okay, so we want to round it to the nearest whole number, and that would be 214. So 214 total students, approximately 214, were surveyed. Example 3, what percentage does x represent on the graph? Okay, now here's x. Remember, the whole entire graph is worth 100%. So if I were to add all of these values together and then subtract from 100, we can figure out what this percentage is. So sometimes you might be missing that, and this is an extra step you'll need in your problem. So let's go ahead and add it all together. We have 3, 16, 14, 18, plus 10, and then I'm simply just going to add all of this up. 6 and 4 make 10, 13, 21, and I have 1, 2, 3, 4, plus 2 is 6. So all of this represents 61%. So if I subtract that from 100, we get 39. So that means that comedy represents 39% of this data. All right, now it is time for you to try. Make sure that you have recorded everything in your notes, and make sure you get all your questions answered, and I will see you next class day.